right, good evening, everyone. It's 5:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Malini Sims. I'm a principal planner with the town, and I'm joined this evening by Renee Overa, senior planner with the town, and Dave Gephardt, who's our chief financial officer. I believe everyone here tonight has participated in this group before, but if not, please make sure you raise your hand so you can introduce yourself. Not seeing any raised hands. So tonight, I do have a brief presentation to go through. I'll go through it pretty quickly because I think most of the information you all are familiar with. And then we'll jump right into the discussion. All right, so the purpose of tonight's meeting is really to wrap up the conversation to get your initial feedback on the draft goals, policies, and actions. We did have some great conversations in February, but as many of you know, we ran out of time to finish discussing the goals, policies, and actions related to revenue sources, community engagement, and the legal requirements. So we're going to take a deep dive on those this evening. We won't be taking a deep dive on the ones that you had already provided feedback on, but those were the revisions were included in your packet of information. So if we do have time and anybody wants to talk about any of those, we will. I do want to make sure that everybody is aware, though, that this is not the last time you will be asked to provide your feedback on these drafts. We will continually be sending them out and asking for your thoughts on them as we go through this process. Again, our aim for this meeting is to achieve consensus on these drafts. Again, as you may recall, your group during the kickoff event looked at ways to define consensus. So ultimately, it is that we can accept it as a whole and that it's what's best for the community. And as we're going through the goals, policies, and actions, just a quick reminder that the goals are the highest level, looking at what we're striving for. Policies are our bridge between the goals and actions are really the specifics, and those are what captures the marching orders for the town, if you will. And as always, just a reminder about the ground rules. We do still have a bit to go through this evening, so I just ask that you stay focused on the area at hand. We will get through everything tonight. And again, we may still have time to go through some of your comments on the other items we already discussed in February. So before I start a discussion, just want to remind folks that our charge is to create a plan that honors what residents voiced over the past year. And the guiding principle on the screen aims to capture these voices that were shared not only through a statistically projectable survey, but also reiterated at events throughout the community as well as online. This also is what provided guidance for our discussions back in February as well as this evening. And at the end of this meeting, I am going to check in with the group to make sure that this is still accurate. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and launch the whiteboard for our discussion tonight. I do want to remind folks that you can adjust your view on the whiteboard. I am going to be moving around it a bit tonight, so please make sure you're using the navigation tools to adjust your view, but also in the chat is a link to the goals, policies, and actions we'll be going through tonight. So if you want, you could open those on your own device. They were also sent out via email. So here's our whiteboard. I know it's really small, but again, our goal is to get through our orange area, which is our revenue sources, and then the green, which is looking at community engagement. Our next box is our legal requirements, and then at least the guiding principles that are under this group's purview, but you haven't had a chance to weigh in on. And if we do have time and anybody who has any specific points they want to talk about regarding the draft goals, policies, and actions we discussed back in February, we can. But with that, I'm going to start us off in our orange section. So if you have the document open on your own, it is the first 2 pages we'll be going through first that are orange. So this is related to revenue sources. So I know it was over a month ago. So just kind of a quick overview of what we talked about is what I heard from the group a lot was that there is a need to look at other revenue sources, expand revenue sources. Then we did discuss specific sources such as user fees, taxes, bonds, property tax, franchise fees, grants. We also talked about sales tax, annexation, and how economic development and tourism are related. And then we ended the conversation a little bit on state shared revenues. So we did, I want to kind of start us off with just the top of this one. So FG1 and H1. We did discuss this back in February. That's why you'll see all the crossouts because what we heard overall from folks was the previous action was way too specific. Also that we don't need to be specifying what types of sources should be used for what. And also with relation to property tax, that it's best that that's not in the document because it could be problematic and may also not be needed based on how other revenue sources are used. So I want to give everyone a moment to read through the revisions we heard and the working actions, policies, and goals. Again, there were some changes made. What's crossed out means that was essentially erased. And what's capitalized in red is the new language that is being proposed to capture what we heard in the last meeting. So again, we're on just the first section, FG1, H1, and then FGH. So under the policies, so give everyone a moment to read it. And then if you have any questions, clarifications needed, or additional guidance to continue to refine these, please raise your virtual hand. Go Frank and then Joe.
I felt that FG1 is maybe more appropriately a policy.
Okay. And is that, may I ask for some clarification, do you think it's too broad as an action or?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it does give a general direction for the following actions to flow into. At least that's my opinion.
Okay. No, appreciate it. And then I guess a follow-up question for you, Frank, is do you think then there needs to be more actions that are a little bit more specific if we move it to a policy? And this is maybe a question for the whole group.
Well, just incidentally, my note to myself on H1
Mm-hmm.
suggests that it actually be more specific in describing the variety of tools. I kind of look on the actions as what'd you call it earlier, marching order to the town council and or the staff. And I just felt like we could offer more specific direction to the implementers.
Yeah, we could definitely include some more examples. Because as you can probably imagine, there's definitely a balance of we want to be, to your point, prescriptive enough that everybody understands the intent, but not so prescriptive it becomes irrelevant over 10 years. But we could definitely add examples to H1 because you guys discussed a lot of good ones. All right, thank you. Let's go to Joe, then Rosa, then Richard.
I agree with Frank on FG1, that if it's going to be so broad as to God, motherhood, and apple pie, it ought to be moved to a policy or something like that. I do think we could be a little more specific in FG1. I don't think we're really giving any as written, I don't think we're giving any direction to town council, town management, or to the residents. It's just something nice to say. H1, I think we need to be a little more specific and give some general types of examples.
Yep.
And I think sooner or later, we're going to have to somehow address in broad terms a property tax initiative question. What if we don't, we're kind of hiding the ball, my personal opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Rosa?
So I agree that if you put property tax as an option, even in the language, you're going to trigger people because that is something that triggers people. So, but I do think this is so vague, like, okay, like let's go to H1 first. Utilize a variety of tools and methods to engage community members to discuss revenue sources. Okay, that's one thing. Then level of service and town projects. It's kind of like we're meshing too many things together there. Can we split that out? Like revenue sources and then maybe give some examples? Or do you think that the examples would become too prescriptive for 10 years? And then like level of service, what do we mean by that? Like, what do we mean by that?
So we were trying to tie together when you're looking at revenue sources, right? Part of that conversation is, are you decreasing a certain service by not increasing revenue sources? You know, from what I gathered from your guys' conversation is maintaining services, part of that is funding. So it's trying to connect that relationship
Oh, okay.
between revenue source, that there is a connection between revenue and what the town's maintaining or providing.
Okay, but I don't look at that as level of service as
Okay.
much as I look at it as town offerings, town programs and language that's more that descriptive, so that someone goes, oh, okay, so we're going to engage the community to discuss, revenue versus what the town, revenue availability, not even, well, revenue sources and availability versus what the town provides, or rather than level of service, because to me, that doesn't paint a picture. And then yeah, I mean, I get what you're trying to do, but I feel like we have like a lot of like descriptors that got pushed into like some very vague language. That's why I think Frank said it sounded like a policy more than a action. So if we could find something in between, very specific language, but I do agree that we don't want to necessarily identify the revenue sources, but it just seems like we're accomplishing a lot in H1. So anyway, I just don't recognize the work we did in it, I guess. You know what I mean? Like we've gone so generic, it doesn't seem recognizable. So if we could make it a little bit more descriptive, but I'll let somebody else chime in.
Thank you, Rosa. And yeah, I think your guys' points, and I think this was made last time about property tax, is what I heard from this group is that however it's put in, if it's put in regardless of context, it could be triggering, and we do need to keep that in mind, is ultimately the goal is to get this approved by the voters. And there are words, language that could trigger folks. So appreciate that comment. Richard and then Hal.
Hey, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. I got a question and then a comment. The question is, how binding are the actions in the plan and who do they bind? Because they certainly can't bind a council, so who do they bind?
So
Is it
there,
staff? That's what I don't understand, because you're not gonna tell a council member what to do, so they're elected, so I don't understand that part.
sure. So as we continue through this process, the actions are associated to departments to help carry out. And so through the strategic plan, which is done every 2 years, the council also kind of does have an opportunity to look at all the actions and prioritize them through the strategic plans of, okay, these are the ones that should be carried out now, for instance, or these are things that we're going to carry out consistently. So some of the actions are, if they're project specific, it may be, a very snapshot in time, but some of these might be ongoing and it really is tied to a department to do.
Okay,
Does that help answer your question?
and you did, how specific do they need to be? In other words, do we have to say, investigate a property tax, investigate this, investigate that, or do we just say, what I think is a very simple comment, engage the community in identifying alternative ongoing revenue sources? That's pretty much it for both FG1 and H1. To me, that's kind of what we ought to be saying.
Yep, nope, that's a good point. Yeah, I would agree with your latter point of, I think what I heard from the group last time is we don't want to be that specific of investigate exact each type, but keep it broad like you had in your second point. So thank you. Hal and then Bill.
Well, first of all, I think we sort of need to acknowledge the context for this discussion right now. We've got a stock market that's going down and then going back up, and we have a lot of discussion about the possibilities of a recession, which will hit everybody, including Oro Valley. And so, the revenue stream that the town has relied upon in the past may not be as robust in the future, at least the near future, as it has been, which could affect provision of services. So I think this is a pretty important discussion in that context. The thing that struck me in looking at this is the new F, maintain core services. What are those services? You've got some indication of that in the previous version, but not here. So maybe the first thing, assuming we leave that language the way it is, that needs to be done under a work action would be to define and prioritize core services. Let's make sure everybody knows what it is the town provides. And if in fact budget reductions have to occur, where would they be made? Who and what might be affected? So I think that'd be an appropriate process to go through.
Yeah, and Hal, or for the group, no, very good point. I will say, this group and other groups did define core services, and I apologize because they're all all these goals and actions are a little bit out of order now because we skipped the first chunk we already went through. So I believe it was streets, water, parks, and maybe a couple other ones. But we'll make sure that's when these are put together,
The other one.
make sure
It
it's.
might indicate where the definition is. But nevertheless, you can define core services, but I think, as I said, you also need to prioritize them to a certain in some way. Or how do you prioritize them? Because I think that may be necessary at some point in the near future.
Mhm. Yep, thank you, Hal. Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Melanie. In answer to Richard's question about, well, we can't bind the town council and basically what can we do? Having been on the town council, I will tell you that the results of the general plan surveys and actions took a lot. We did absolutely look at them. We were influenced strongly because it is one of the few things we do where we can actually reach into the community and have the community tell us what they think. obviously there's, there's problems on certain, depending on who's doing who's joining the general plan effort, but it is absolutely there, and I guarantee you that if we do our job right, they will listen. They may or may not. It will influence what they do in their votes going forward. Thank you.
Great. And thank you, Bill, for that clarification. So yes, our council definitely does use the general plan in decision making. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So what I heard from the group is the previous we swung maybe too far the other way with FG1, the revision. In terms of it now is too broad. It was too specific before, now too broad. But I do want to ask folks is, Richard gave a way to maybe combine FG1 and H1 into really focusing on, I think what the group was talking about was engaging the community in those alternative and ongoing revenue sources. Is that something that the group thinks would work to find a middle ground and we can move FG1 into a policy? Mike? Oh, and you're muted, Mike.
I think what we're after is, or what we're trying to do is to make sure that we identify every possible revenue source as we go through. Now, I mean, from the viewpoint of the town over the next few years, we want to see if we can come up with new revenue sources so that we can continue to function the way we want to function. So I guess the working action would be is that we want to be able to involve the community to let them understand how these revenue sources work, what revenue sources that we want to try to get. That may vary because we had said that we want to stay general because we want to leave it up to mayor and council and the community to approve a revenue source or to adopt a new revenue source. So I think the point here is, well, we want to keep it general, but we want to ensure that as far as working actions go, that we do look at every possible revenue source and don't just, not consider one now because we don't like the word, but just engage the community so that we can explain what these revenue sources are, how they work, and so forth. So I think what we want in the working actions is just to work with the community to identify revenue sources and see which ones are the best ones to use.
Thank you for summarizing that up. Does everybody agreed with his summary of the intent behind this?
I agree as long as it's worded that we look at, or the town looks at existing and potential revenue sources, put them both in there.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
I'm good with it.
Appreciate the discussion. That does help give us some more guidance, so we'll work on that one. The next one is related to annexation, and I do want to pose a question to the group. So when we talk, I think a common theme throughout all of your meetings has been definitely an emphasis on annexation and specific areas. We've heard State Land 880, Foothills Mall, things of that nature. Right now, I-1 is pretty broad. It's just update the annexation strategy. Does the group think we will be talking a little bit about annexation areas in the land use meeting, but that's more focused on making sure our land use map includes all the areas of potential annexation. So I want to make sure that this group's voice is captured. And so does the group want to add to I-1 something about emphasizing specific areas like State Land 880 or Foothills Mall? Just so it's more clear, because right now it's still pretty broad of just identify priority areas. Do you want to add some examples of what those priority areas should be? Mike and then Rosa.
Well, I think we're kind of taking the approach here that with the revenue sources, we wanted to be general. So
Mhm.
I think with annexation, there's a lot involved in trying to say which area we can or cannot annex. So I think what we want to do here is make sure we're looking at every conceivable option in annexation and make sure that we work that as hard as we can, because, and also what type of annexation, because sometimes you can annex people, sometimes you can annex just property or something like that. So when it comes down to it, the more people that we can bring in, the more money we can get from the state. So I don't think we need to get so detailed in which areas, that could be left up to the council as we go along, as things evolve, because there might be property out there right now that we're not even thinking about annexation that all of a sudden might come up as a possibility. So I think if we're going to say we want to be general, it just seems to me that we should follow that all the way through with all the elements we're working with.
Thank you, Mike. Rosa, then Bill.
I agree on the annexation. I would stay general. I like how you worded it for to conduct fiscal analysis on all potential annexations, because then that kind of captures why you even look at annexation. But if we put the 880 or anything like that in there, I think once again, it could be triggering and you could turn off a potential voter. So I would just leave, I would agree with him to leave this particular thing general as well, so that, you have the method in there, fiscal analysis, to determine, the viability of potential annexations.
Thank you, Rosa. And then Bill.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I'm not looking at I'm having a little trouble with my computer. But I think as long as we come out with that, one of the major things that we should be looking at under this use is annexation. And now we're going to figure out why and how and where we do it and all that stuff. It's fine. That's much more detailed, but I don't know whether the wording is such. I think it should be one of the headlines. We have the opportunities. We may or may not think as a council that's what we want to do as the next, but it needs to be there, because if we want all the things we want, we're going to have more people buying things. We're going to have to grow, and we have so little left in our town that's vacant and could be grow. So anyway, I would like to make sure we understand that it is one way to keep us from having to have a property tax, by the way, as we look at all that. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, then, is there anything anybody wants to add to these annexation actions in order to make sure your priorities are captured as a group? I think it was Joe, then Frank, then Hal.
Just for clarification, are you talking about I1 or I is to leave as is?
So it's all of it, so all the I's. But my question for the group was if there needs to be any areas of emphasis added to I1. But if you have comments on any of the I's, please let me know.
Well, I think I
Mhm.
is much better than I1.
Okay, and I would be the policy within which directs the action under I1.
Well, okay, I1 is, again, being repetitious, but it's kind of God, motherhood, and apple pie. And if that's what we want, that's okay. I mean, if that's what the team wants, okay. But I think if we could somehow combine some of the words in I into I1,
Okay,
update and support annexations that are economically beneficial to the town could be I.
okay. Thank you. And then Frank?
I think that last little discussion clarified the question that I had, but I did want to revisit, I think it was Bill's point, and ask him, is he saying that I is appropriately a policy in the headlining point?
It's an action.
Bill, you might be muted.
Well, now I'm embarrassed because I left the room, so I'm not sure what the
Oh.
issue is, so I'm sorry.
Well, I don't think it's necessary for you to explain where you went or why you went there.
Well, maybe. So I'm
Uh,
sorry.
So the question, Bill, was, does I, the policy, help bring enough headline, I guess is a word that was used, to annexations?
I think it's
Yeah, I
fine.
think it does.
Okay.
I think it does.
Okay, and then Hal?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should expand on I2 a bit. I mean, what's the purpose of doing the fiscal analysis? I assume it's to determine whether the short-term and long-term uh, uh, revenues from the annexation will exceed the cost.
Yeah,
Uh,
so we do a fiscal analysis on all annexations. And maybe Dave, if you want to explain more what that is.
Well, I would
Sure.
like to, but I'm not sure that I can. I think,
It is that though.
yeah, I
It's-
mean,
yeah.
I think that understanding is correct. We would, the fiscal analysis would want to look at the short-term and long-term revenues that are projected to be collected due to the annexation, directly attributable to the annexation, and then look at the ongoing costs. But that'd be the fiscal side of it. There's also qualitative aspects of annexation as well that that would need to be considered. But just as it relates to the financial side, the fiscal analysis should capture whether the juice is worth the squeeze.
Does that help, Hal?
yeah, I assume that's what you would be doing, but maybe for the general reader, you might want to expel that a little more explicitly.
Okay. Yep. Any other comments on this first group? Not seeing any, so I do hear that we have some changes to make to the FG1, focusing on the need to engage the community to identify new revenue sources, and then also look at, but everybody was good with the annexation one staying broad. Thumbs up. Not emphasizing any specific areas. Okay. We're gonna go to the next
Well,
page.
that kind of depends on, are you leaving the wording as is, or are you going to modify it somewhat?
We'll still modify it for the other comments, but not adding any specific areas, is what I heard.
Okay,
Yeah, so
thanks for the clarification.
yep. Let's see if I can get this to. Nope. Okay. So I am going to share a different screen real fast so we can go through the rest of the orange ones. Just one moment. Okay. Make it full screen for everybody. Nope, it's not letting me. So these were the second batch related to revenue sources. So we did talk about sales tax, not wanting to increase it, but maximize it by supporting businesses, and then how that also kind of tells into tourism. And so before we did have two under here, tried to combine those into K3, knowing that we did also talk a lot more about economic development, tourism, including the Performing Arts Center in our March meetings. So there's definitely more specifics in those, but for this aspect, especially as it relates to revenue, keeping it a little bit more broad. So we're on K and K3. And then we'll go to the next one. So anything on the Ks? Mike?
I kind of like what we had in K1 and K2 before you crossed it out. K3, support revenue operating businesses. I'm not sure what we mean. You want all business to be generating revenue. And I just think K1 and K2 give more of an action for someone to work on than K3. Just my thoughts.
Yep. So I know when we were thinking of revenue generating businesses, it was ones that had sales tax or created a lot of sales tax or bed sales tax, but I hear you.
Yeah,
That's just the clarification. Rosa?
I didn't like well-being. That's not descriptive enough. Like I would say support revenue generating businesses and events that contribute to the financial whatever, quality of life, but well-being doesn't paint a picture for me.
Sure.
Like maybe get a tad more specific there, like that contributes to the, financial stability and of the town and quality of life, or financial stability and quality of life, something like that. I don't know.
Okay. And then Mike, I don't know, use your hand.
I guess, what do we mean when we say support revenue generating businesses? I have an idea there, but I like up in K1 where we say we promote and implement to shop locally. And if you want to add something about support creation of new businesses or something like that as another action, I just don't see way K3 is written that it's a workable action.
Sure.
Where K1 and K2 seem to fall into the more of that workable action than K3 did.
Yeah, and some of this was when we bridge it all together there are more, to your point, specific actions that the Economic Development Group came up with on how we could support those. But I hear you that as written as action right now, it's not very workable. But yeah, so we can look into all the other actions that the group created for business.
Well, maybe we can kind of
see
reference what the other group has done, support revenue generator as, specified by the developmental group or whatever, however word you want to do there, just to tie them together, I guess.
We may even look at making this one a policy with all those other actions under it. Yeah. Depending. And then Hal?
Yeah, I read the language, support revenue generating businesses, which I assume for the most part would be retail businesses, because service businesses don't generate sales tax, right? So does that mean we're not going to support service businesses? I guess maybe it might be better just to say support businesses and events that contribute to the well-being of the town, or whatever word you want to use. I know Rosa doesn't like well-being, but I think we want to go beyond just retail businesses in supporting them, even though service businesses don't generate sales tax necessarily.
Yeah, and for this one, we definitely were looking under the lens of connecting it to revenue and town finances.
Okay.
For this specific group. But I hear you. We could definitely look at expanding it, or as Rosa said, maybe it's support businesses that contribute to the financial stability or something of the town to still make that connection.
Right, and certainly service businesses do contribute to the well-being of the community, even though they may not provide revenue directly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Richard?
Well, it is.
Okay, yeah, it says support. Why doesn't it say create? I mean, support is like, doesn't mean anything to me, but create says that there's an action step. People are gonna really do something. Support says we're gonna kind of look at what other people are doing and we'll support it. So I don't get that, but maybe create revenue generating business opportunities that contribute to the financial well-being of the town would kind of be more specific, I guess.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, then next, there was some discussion about state shared revenue, and
Delaney,
what,
Mark had his hand up.
oh, I apologize. Mark?
Thank you. Richard's point, I think that we do need to put in there support and create, or create and support revenue generating businesses and events that contribute to the fiscal well-being of the town. That to Rose's point, well-being can mean any number of things. I think a qualifier of the fiscal nature of that well-being is important. And Richard's spot on. Supporting is one thing, creating is another, and we need to do both of those things. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mark, and I apologize I didn't see your hand. And then Frank?
It seems to me that K3 really deserves to be a policy.
Mm-hmm.
And under that policy could be such specifics as the promotion of tourism, the development or construction of a performing arts center. These were specific actions that were talked about in the group discussions, and I think that they were the result of a fair amount of thought. And if we're serious about wanting the town to do these things, the action plans under that policy would be the appropriate place to show it.
Yep. Yep, thank you. Okay. So what I heard for that one is changing the language for all businesses, but also providing more context to well-being, or even removing that word so it's more related to financial stability or fiscal well-being. And then also possibly moving it as a policy, because this group did have some more specific actions related to how to achieve that. Okay, so moving to the next one, not seeing any more hands up. State shared revenue, what we heard in that one was there needs to be education about state shared revenue, mostly so people understand what it is, but also as part of that education is just considering implications that decisions have on our state shared revenue. So we're on L, the last part, L, M, and L3. And then Frank, I don't know if your hand's re-raised or raised from earlier.
Consider implications of the decisions have on.
All right, looks like folks are done reading. Any comments on these ones for state shared revenue? We good to move? Oh, Mike? Oh, and you're muted, Mike. Oh, you're muted, Mike.
What exactly are we trying to say in M? That just seems kind of vague, and are we trying to say what development activities we need to look at to try to increase shared state revenue, or what we say implementations of development? I'm not sure what we're saying there.
So my understanding from the group, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was the discussion was that decisions can impact the amount of state shared revenue. So I don't think,
Decisions on what development?
yeah. So if we annex or don't annex, if we grow or not grow, essentially.
Well, we know that if we have annexations, we'll grow, and we know that that's a positive impact on state shared revenue. I guess what are we trying to say as a policy there? I guess
Mine-
it's confusing to me.
Yeah, it was just to make sure that it's included in the plan as when we're making decisions, it's being considered. So highlighting it, if you will, with M. Joe and then Mark.
Thinking about what I was going to say, I don't know if it's necessary, but should maybe M
Mhm.
be moved over to where we talk about annexation strategy?
Okay. Yeah.
Because wouldn't that be part of the process? Dave?
Yeah, and maybe this is a Dave question.
I think it
Um,
certainly would factor into the financial analysis of the annexation.
And I guess though for state shared revenue though, it's not just annexation, right? It
Right.
could be
No, there's-
other
Right.
types of development too. So
I mean, infill growth can impact
Right.
state shared revenue as well. So
yeah, so
It
that
could
was the
probably
only
be an
reason.
either, but I think it's an important point.
Okay. Mark, you were next.
Thank you. I think that more education about the sources of state shared revenue is appropriate because we say it as if it's one homogeneous thing, and those of us who understand state shared revenue know it comes in many different streams and is impacted in many different ways by decisions that we make. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about how state shared revenues are generated and from what they're generated. So I would kind of like it better if we said more information or more education about the sources of state shared revenue and how decisions can impact the revenue that Oro Valley receives, something along those lines. But I think we need to better understand sources and the nature of state shared revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do think that please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that also touches on the conversation we had a month ago. So let's see, next is Bill and then Rosa.
Yeah, and this is Dave. This is a Dave Gebhardt question. I've had a lot of people talking around me and with me about charter cities and whether we should be looking at that as an option. And I don't know what that means on the revenue side of this, whether there are increased revenues in that. I know that there is a lot of ability to control your own destiny, not the least of which is in our elections. But I think we ought to be thinking about that and getting it someplace in this path forward, because I think it's a legitimate question. We are just under the 50,000 population right now, which, as I understand it, was the minimum population to do it. So, Dave, is there a revenue benefit to becoming a charter city?
Bill, to be
Hello.
honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. That's something I would have to research and try to find out for you. I don't know the answer to that right now. I can't answer that one.
Well, whether it's that was the only really that would make any difference is if we wanted to put it under the revenue side of all this.
Mhm.
But somewhere along the line, Melanie, I'd love to see us put this as something to study, you know, specific, very in detailed way, the benefits or not of becoming a charter city, because we're right there and we could do it, and there are positives and negatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Rosa?
So to Mark's comment, I think you could combine L and M and put part of his comment in there, educate the community on the various types of state shared revenue and how development decisions affect those revenue streams. That way it's related to it and also expanded to include you know, the different types of state shared revenues.
And before we go to the next, Mike, to your initial comment of what does M mean, perhaps combining it with L and specifying state shared revenue may help clarify.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay. Frank?
I would second that idea. I think L and M can be combined fairly easily and streamline the document.
Okay, thank you. And then Joe, I don't know if your hand is back up or stayed up.
You didn't de-hand me, but I agree that L and M would make sense combined. And then I just have a general curiosity question on the 50,000. Is that full-time residents or total people, snowbirds and full-time residents?
So I believe it's what's counted in the census, which
Census.
they count usually census day is April 1st. So usually if you're here on April 1st, you're counted with us. It depends though on the person and where they are. But
So it could be a combination.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, I'm
You
gonna
can
go back.
flag me.
And then Richard?
I'm real slow on the uptake. What happened with Bill's idea about a chartered city? Because I've investigated that over time. And it has some very intriguing implications, but I don't know, and David might, the financial implications of that. So perhaps, you know, that is something that we need to be thinking about. I bet you no other group's gonna put it in. So
Yeah.
kind of has some interesting aspects to it. And I think Bill's onto something.
Yeah, I think we can, if the group's okay with it, adding the more of it as an exploration so we can understand more of the pros and cons and what's all goes into it. Looks like I'm getting a lot of head shakes. And I agree. I doubt any other group will bring it up. So want to get it in from tonight's discussion. All right, anything else on revenue sources, and then we'll move on. Okay, I'm going to go back to our whiteboard, just one moment. Mike?
Just a general comment here. I was wondering, you know, the study that was done with the town where it identified that our revenue, the gap between our revenues and expenditures is getting closer and closer together over time. And I wonder, can that statement or that explanation be provided? Is there an introductory area to this particular section that could be added? Because, you know, that's kind of why we're discussing all this, is because of that particular situation. So can that be included somewhere in this general plan?
Yeah, so there's to each section there will be an introduction with some of the background information, but also what we heard from the community even over the last year. So we can kind of add that in to give the context.
All right, thanks.
Good point. Okay, so our next area was focused on community involvement. And we this is definitely where we can, as you guys noted, add some more details to H1 of different tools and the intent behind this. You guys gave a lot of great tools and methods, and then the reasoning of not only why information education needs to happen, but also what types. So under these, some of these you've seen, you just saw. So any changes we make to H1, we will make here as well. But the policy and goals are different. So we can look at all of these together. So it's H1, L3 you also saw before, but B1 and B3 are, you saw last time, but they're new for this meeting. So give everyone a moment to read through these goals, policies, and actions. And what we did here on B1 last time when we talked was that there needs to be a report for all the funds and one comprehensive report, not just not having separate reports. You have to try to find information. And it seems like that's happening, but we could work on the format a little bit better. And then also in efforts to stay broad, we took out the examples of Popular Report and Know Your Budget, but we can put those in. Again, it's a balance. We want to be broad, but if there's a need to have specific examples so everybody understands the intent, then we should add those. Hey, Mike. And Mike, you are muted again.
The statement that we have in there at various levels of financial literacy. You know, when you do reports, you know, you can go down to a level of detail, but maybe if we're looking at trying to train people, then maybe we should address that in L3, where you have some kind of a training or a community. That community academy is very good at, where you could put something like that to kind of train people on what all this means. And when you're trying to write reports and provide data, trying to do it at a whole bunch of different levels could get very cumbersome, or, you know, so, and that would be, and what's understandable by one person may not be understandable by another person. So I think maybe that particular sentence there could be addressed as part of the L3, and then the B1, you're just trying to come up with a format that would easily address, you know, all the various funds and levels of detail that people would like to see.
So let me ask this to the group. So, and maybe this is where we need to re-add Popular Report and Know Your Budget. Because what I heard is the information about finances needs to be more accessible to folks. And part of accessibility is level of understanding. So the Know Your Budget's great because it's a 1-2 pager, quick, you can read through it and gather. But if you want to do a deep dive, there's the annual report, other reports. So that's what the aim was with the wording, was to make sure there's still various levels of report for your person who just for the first time just moved here, wants to get some quick information, and those who want to take the deep dive. And they may not have time though to do the education or training, if you will. So maybe to ask the group your thoughts on that aspect. Or Mike, if you have any more.
Well, I mean, I understand that you have summary pages and stuff that people can look at, and they use that to decide how detailed or summary they want. But when you get into literacy, you're talking, even someone can look at the summary and not understand it, and you know, you're not necessarily going to help them, you know, with the summary or the executive summary in these various reports. That's why I'm thinking, you know, address literacy in your training, and after they've been through that, then they can decide what level of detail they want to get into.
That makes sense. So maybe we need to work on the term of various levels of something other than financial literacy. So it's not
Right.
a teaching thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
yep, appreciate the clarification. Joe?
I would change it to read, produce and make available financial reports that provide comprehensive information, period. I'd end it there. And then if we want to go back into L3 and training or whatever, we should, but at this, for B1, I think it ought to be broad. And how, if we use the word distribute, how do we define that? Why don't we just say make available?
Okay. And part of the distribution is tied into B3 as well, but we can change. And then Frank?
I would think that perhaps B1 and B3 are relatively easily combinable.
So the only reason we kept B3 separate is it's very broad, not just about finances. So we can use this one for even more than
Basically,
just,
if you combine them, it gets even more too broad.
yeah. Where B3 is, access to all.
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. And then one other comment while I've got my hand up on policy N.
Mhm.
It implies including, it doesn't imply it, it says it, include all residents in town decisions. That seems a little bit too democratic. Just as a practical comment.
Okay.
Well, you could, just remove the word all.
Or maybe it's to strive to include.
Residents in town decisions, remove the word all. That gives you the latitude if you have a specific area you're trying to make a decision. Let's say on the south side of town and the north side of town, there's no impact. Just deal with it that way.
And Rosa? Thank you, Joe.
So B3, the town website is the bane of my existence. The other day I was looking up an ordinance that had a revision. And the keywords were in both documents, but only the first one came up. And in order to get the revised ordinance, I had to go figure out the ordinance number and put specifically that number in to get it to come up. Our website has the worst keyword searches of anything I've ever dealt with. So if we could target that, like searching, it has to be, our website has to be, you have to be able to search it with keywords and get what you're looking for. And it stinks right now. And I know that there's a way to do that. It just requires, a specific IT effort. Because that's really how people find things, I mean, and so, yeah, navigation isn't really that big of a problem. But searchability, making it more, search friendly, I guess. I don't know how to describe what I'm frustrated with, but I can always find things. It just takes a while, but it just doesn't make any sense to me if they both use the same keywords, why one comes up and the other one doesn't. That just makes no sense to me. So anyway.
No, good clarification. We could definitely add that into that bullet. And you don't need the words. I think we've all struggled with that, so we understand. Richard?
Yeah, are we talking about just the annual report? Are we talking about the quarterly report that David provides and his people nicely provide to the council on results for 3 months, 6, 9, 12 with forecasts and budgets? Really insightful. Are we talking the monthly report that David presents to the Budget and Finance Commission? So I'm trying to figure out what do you want reported? Because I can tell you that there's just 3 or 4 funds that matter. I mean, there's other funds, there's 13 or 14 funds. It's complicated, but it's 3 or 4 that matter. So I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to give people. And let me tell you, who's even going to look at this stuff on a monthly, quarterly basis? I know I do because I got to write about it, but I don't know anybody else that's going to look at that stuff. So I'm just kind of swimming in my head what we're trying to do here, which I know is stupid. Probably should have said that a week ago, but so that's kind of my thought. I'm a little bit confused.
So I think from the previous conversation for B1, it was centered around definitely the popular report and the know your budget. So those are annual, not the quarterly or monthly. But so maybe to your point, Richard, we need to keep what was struck out, put it back in so people know what financial reports are being discussed. Or are intended. Mike?
Well, I would think since you're trying to get information out to everybody that you would include all of them because all the reports, they're at different time frames, they're at different levels of detail. There's differences in them. So, on the website now, all of them are out there now, and it's just a matter of determining, maybe providing more instruction for people how to get to them. But so I would, if you're going to talk about reporting, then I think you need to include all your reporting on a financial basis because they all have different information sometimes that, you look at the annual financial report that comes out that they get audited, that has a lot of information in it. But if you want to look at it from a month to month, quarter to quarter, then obviously you're going to look at the other reports. So I think all the reports are out there. It's just helping people recognize how they can get to them. And if they need to adjust formats or detail, that's something that could be looked at.
Okay, thank you. And then Joe, I'm not sure if your hand is still up from before.
No, it's a new hand.
New? Okay.
Listening to Rosa about searchability and all that, the thought struck me, should there be a action in that we've used, and I'm struggling with what would be the right words, but should there be an action or a policy of reviewing the current IT systems and their support for future needs?
Okay.
As a policy?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It'd have to be better worded, but I think the way, the way the electronic world is going and the changes, there should be spelled out in our 10-year plan, mention of and some kind of wording to review IT systems.
Yep.
Now, where that belongs, I'm not sure.
Okay. Yep. Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, I think I agree with Mike's prior comment about I think this B1 really needs to encompass all financial reporting. I don't know that I think it's fine to call out the popular annual report and the Know Your Town's Budget report. I think that's fine, but I think this B1 really needs to encompass all. I think that utilizing those reports as an example might be fine, but this really needs to hit on all financial reports. The other thing that I'm not seeing here that I think Tony brought up in an earlier session, whenever you're talking about financial reporting, the financial reporting is only as useful as it is timely. And I know Tony had an issue with the timeliness of the monthly financial reports, or at least the schedule as to when they're distributed and when they're made available to the public. So I think it might be helpful to add a timeliness. I'm not trying to sway any of you, but I think it might be helpful to add a timeliness component to B1 as well.
Gonna add that, and there are other policies, actions related to publishing schedules and doing annual updates too. So we'll make sure those are included. Other comments about community engagement as it relates to finances, but also in general. Okay, I'm gonna move us on. So the next group is gonna be a little bit new. We didn't exactly get direction from you all about it before, but we do have some legal requirements. We need to make sure we are satisfying in the 10-year plan. One is related to cost of development. That's our impact fees. It's basically making sure that any new development is paying their fair share. And then the other one looks at public services and facilities. Some of that is satisfied but through a map. So the plan will have a map of all public buildings in it. So we do have some goals, policies, and actions related to specifically to cost of development and services. And again, it's making sure that all of our costs are recovered from new development and that our fees are up to date. And then those actions are related to updating the impact fees, looking at development agreements as necessary, and then making sure that our public facilities are adequate for our population. So aligning those with land use, but also making sure that we have everything in place to serve residents. So I'll give everyone a moment to read through this chart.
Hey, Malini, I can't see the whole chart. I can't get the little hand to move it around. So what am I doing wrong?
Let me zoom out. Does that help everyone? I don't know, may have made it smaller, too small. Or if you are able to, if you click on the link in the chat, it will open the PDF of it. And if folks are having trouble, I can also go back to the PDF. Give me one moment and I can open the PDF. Just reshare. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit smaller, but you should be able to see the whole thing now. Oops, sorry. There we go. We're not focused on the guiding principle right now, but we'll get there in a moment. But please take a moment to read through the legal requirements as well as the goals, policies, and actions. Then Bill?
Yeah, again, maybe I'm stupid here, but I understand legally you have to have something like this. But why wouldn't we do this every single time? I mean, this is almost saying to our finance people, you wouldn't know how to do this if we didn't tell you that we think it's important. I mean, it's kind of on the edge of whether this is something that needs to be where it is here, how it is. but it's just a frustration of looking at it and say, come on, we don't want to tie the hands of, or we don't want to assume that our people don't know what they're talking about, because this is really aimed at staff. This is, in my view, it's aimed at development staff and finance staff to say, oh, we got an annexation possibility, you need to go do these things. As opposed to more of a broader policy. Just my thought, maybe I don't understand it.
And maybe what we could do, no, it's a good point, Bill. And to your point, we do these items now. So maybe there needs to be something about continue to review. So it is clear that these are happening now.
Absolutely, I agree, Melanie, that would do it.
And then Joe?
Quickly on O1,
Mhm.
rather than use regularly, I would use the words annually or continue to
We can-
update impact fees, developers pay their, I would suggest using the word appropriate rather than fair
Hmm.
share. And then in O2, I would drop the ending that provides a necessary community benefits. I would just end it after public facility improvements.
Okay. And I do believe in, Dave, I don't know if you know this, but correct me if I'm wrong. So the impact fees, I believe they're legally required to be updated so often. I just don't recall. So that's why we didn't put a time frame. But Dave, do you remember how often they
Yeah,
have to
it's,
be?
it's every 5 years.
Okay. Not that we couldn't do it more often, but at least every 5 years we have to be looking at them.
Well, that would make sense to use the word continue
Yeah. Okay.
because we're currently doing it.
Thank you. Okay. A few folks are still reading, so I want to give everyone a couple more time. Frank?
My thought is that the working goal
Mhm.
for 3
Mhm.
could be modified, maybe changed semi-dramatically to actually require compliance to legal requirements generally. It's a motherhood issue. It's a flag that has to be saluted. Maybe we should show it in our plan,
Mm.
just for that reason. But the goal, as it's now stated, only talks about what?
What maybe we could do too is, O1 is definitely a legal requirement, so it could be continue to regularly, I don't know. I don't know the wording, but we can add legal requirement in there too, which would specify which would give the 5 years.
It just seems to me that we should worship at the altar of legal compliance.
Sure. Yep. Rosa and then Hal?
So what tripped me up was fair share is in O1,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then our fully recovered is in 3.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that fully recovered is the more kind of demanding, phrase. And if that's what we're trying to do is fully recover, then it should be consistent.
Okay. Okay, and then Hal?
Yeah, I'm wondering about fully recover. I'm looking at the language in the first paragraph under legal requirement, the end of the first sentence. It says, with appropriate exceptions when in the public interest. And if everything has to be fully recovered, I think we might be tying our hands in certain situations where we have an annexation or some kind of development that would be in the interest of the community of the town, but may not fully pay its way. I think, you're talking about under O2 development agreements. I assume that could also apply to annexation agreements, where you might want to give something in order to get something long term. So I fully recovered may be a bit too limiting.
Okay. Other thoughts on that, Mark?
Get back on what Rosa was saying. I think in 01, regularly is too vague. I realize there's a 5-year requirement legally that we update those impact fees, but perhaps to state annually, because things move a lot in an annual cycle, to annually update. I don't like the word fair share. It has a political connotation to it. An appropriate share or some other qualifying language there might be better than fair share. And then again, to the points others made, fully recovered may be too onerous depending on how you qualify what fully recovered means. I think if you don't know, that's my alarm telling me I need to do something else. But I think if are recovered is probably a better qualifier. Just leave it as are recovered as opposed to fully recovered, because that could be onerous depending on how you quantify what recovered actually means and the cost of the development. But I think regularly is too vague. Fair is a bad word, and fully recovered is probably a little onerous. Thanks.
What does the group think about, so maybe it's annually review and then possibly update, because I'm just wondering from a standpoint of may not always need to be updated annually. And Dave, I would defer to you if you think they do, but
Yeah, I think that the challenge, Malini, is that if we did this, like to update your impact fees, you're paying due to the complexity of the calculations, you're paying a consultant a lot of money. And to do that on an annual basis, I'm not sure that that's worth it, especially given the build out of the town, where we don't have a lot of developable land. So I would stay away from an annual. I think that's why we kind of went to more of a vague regularly. But and then by statute we have to do it by every 5 years. So there is a cost involved. And when you're not bringing in, because of build out, when you're not bringing in as much development revenue, I think that can be a little bit problematic. But those are just things to consider for the group.
Well, maybe thoughts about the word annually updating. Because as Dave said, it does take, I'm just thinking from and we'll go with what the group wants, but I'm thinking just from an implementation standpoint, you could almost be getting one and then hiring a consultant to start reviewing again within a year, so. But we definitely could specify that at a minimum, it's every 5 years. So regularly has more context. But Rosa?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, because I agree that if you were literally, just finished one review, you'd be starting another. And I think that when we realized the impact fees weren't updated the last time it came up, they were updated a couple years ago, I think. So I think I would just say, regularly and at a minimum every 5 years, update impact fees, because we don't have a lot of development right now. And, it isn't going to be as impactful as impact fees used to be. And the other thing I was going to say is I agree with Mark about the language, it's strange how it just migrated to all different, like, severities, so I think just kind of making that a little bit smoother, and having the option, for negotiation, I think is good. But, yeah, I would do that. I would just say, and update when applicable, like regularly review and update when applicable, impact fees.
Or when, yeah,
Or
okay,
when necessary, I mean, they may be the same,
Right.
there may not be a big change,
Okay. And then Richard, and then Joe. Oh, and you're muted, Richard.
Sorry. Why not just say update is required by law?
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty, I look at this thing and I go, this is like a legal thing.
It
Our
is.
staff just kind of worked on it. I just want to make this as easy as possible to get through. I don't think this needs to be controversial or directive or doing anything different than we're doing, because I know the council, I know town looks at it periodically. I mean, these are pretty smart people. I just don't want to get us in trouble trying to put more into this than there is.
Okay. And then Joe?
I would prefer using the word continue because it gives you more wiggle room than setting a defined time frame. Continue to review, in compliance with state law. And then you could also, I agree with David that, doing it annually, from what he's explained, economically doesn't make sense.
So everyone's good with not having it annual? Okay. Oh yeah, we'll work on the wording and also making sure it's consistent between the goals, policies, and actions in terms of strength. Any other thoughts on the legal requirements? Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing then. And bring back our whiteboard. So I do want to check in with this group on the guiding principles. So please let me know if you're unable to see it, but the first guiding principle is regarding town revenue sources. So on the left, again, is what we heard as the results from the projectable survey. I do want to mention, though, that's just one of 3 outreach ways of outreach that were done over the last year. So even at events, we did hear when we asked things like, what do you think the biggest challenge for Oro Valley will be? People did respond that finances or revenue would be a challenge. We didn't get a whole lot of responses out at events about specific revenue sources, but that's kind of to be expected. And the guiding principle is kind of on the right-hand side. It's what's highlighted in blue. So does this group, do you think the guiding principle is still accurate? We want to make sure, again, that it reflects what we heard last year. But if there's any need for refinement based on your conversation, please let me know. And also the guiding principle is purposefully the most broad in terms of our level of hierarchy between goals, policies, and actions. Looks like everyone's done reading, so no, everyone good to move on to the next one? Okay. So the other guiding principle, so some of you, I think a lot of you were in these conversations. So this one stems from our economic development and tourism meetings that we had in March. We did just run out of time in that second meeting to go through this one. So it is under this group's purview. And so is related to tourism and business attraction. So again, this also kind of goes into a conversation earlier about economic development, but I just wanted to check in with this group as well. Make sure that this one, you think, to check in if you think it captures what we heard last year, but also if there's any refinement needed based on your discussions as a group, not only tonight, but February and March. Richard?
Yeah, just a quick clarification.
Mhm.
What does increase customer base to retain and attract new businesses mean?
So a lot of what that I ended up stemming into was from some of the other groups even was possibly having more mixed use developments, to have more people nearby our commercial areas, also having more promotion of our businesses to retain the existing ones and even the tie to tourism. So if there's events, making sure our businesses know there's like a big swim meet going on so they could take advantage of it. So this would be kind of the hierarchy guidance for that, but then those are the very specific actions that could fall under how to achieve that. Yeah, it looks like most people are generating other thoughts or comments. Or Richard, if that didn't answer your question, let me. Okay. Mike? And Mike, you're muted.
I mean, customer base sounds fine, but I'm wondering, I think there was discussions about population density, and that's kind of what we were trying to achieve in the marketplace, was to create, more density of population in an area so that it would support the, new businesses in that area. So would population density be good, or you just want to leave it at customer base?
I would maybe suggest we leave it broad just because it's a guiding principle. And there's more, I mean, population density, you're right, is part of it. Then there's also, campaigns or other ways. I think Shop OV came up once too, as just ways to help businesses market themselves. But
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah. Okay, so these are all we needed to go through tonight. What I gathered from folks is, especially on the revenue sources, we still have some work to do to just, and a lot of these, what I gathered is we still have some work to add some clarifications, make sure we're not using jargon or terms that aren't easy for everyone to interpret or know what it means. But is everyone from a thumbs up or a head shake? Are these headed still in the right direction, knowing that we're going to continue to refine them? Okay. So we do have some time left. Were there any in the packet that you guys did want to touch on? So I did include our second draft revisions. We don't have enough time to go through all of them tonight. But we did talk about them at the end of February, went through each of them. And we made some revisions based on what you said. Was there any that stood out that folks do want to talk about tonight before we head out? And this would be on the document. It's the last 4 pages. Mike?
This is more of a wording situation, but all of the working goals,
Mhm.
it says ensure sustainable funding and efficient allocation of resources. And I'm wondering if we should say ensure sustainable revenue sources instead of funding. Because funding can mean funding, once you have a budget established, you might fund certain things. But I think what we're kind of talking about here is trying to have sustainable revenue sources.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay. So I do have some next steps to share with folks. If there are no further comments, so just one moment. Okay. So, first and foremost, I do want to thank you all for all the great conversations you've had since February and for also participating in this meeting. I know it was added to your schedule, but the feedback you gave tonight really gave me at least a really good direction on how to continue to refine these. This will be this group's last meeting. For now, we are going to take a break over the summer. But if you're interested, there are other working groups are continuing to meet throughout mid-May. So we will be talking about the land use map next week. I know some of you are already planning to attend those. That will be on Monday and next Monday and Thursday. Those are in person from 5:30 to 7:30 in council chambers, but there is an online option. But we are encouraging folks to come in person if possible, just because the experience will be a little bit different if you're online. We also, our sustainability group started last night. So if you're interested in environment, climate, or water, great time to pop into those meetings. Those are all online. And then our community group will also be finishing up this month, talking about parks, recreation, and trails. Now, with that said, we still have a lot of work to do, as you can imagine. So we will be, right now, what we're working on is what we're calling the 30% draft. And that is taking all the comments we've heard from all the resident working groups and all the goals and policies and actions and starting to reconcile them. Now, this 30% draft will still not be the final draft by any means, but it will start to help organize all the group's work. We will be sending those out via email to resident working group members in May and asking for your comments. And that's a really great opportunity to also provide your very specific wordsmithing comments. But it will be more of an opportunity for everyone to see, for each of you to see what all the groups have been working on and how all of your work is coming together. And then lastly, after in the summer, staff will be continuing to make those refinements and making those relationships between each group. Then we'll be reaching back out in August to meet again to look at a more polished draft of the entire plan. And we'll want your guys' input, especially on that plan, because that before it goes out to the broader community for public review in the fall. So are there any questions of where we're headed or last minute comments anybody wants to make before we go? Richard? Oh,
There
and
we
you're,
go.
there you go.
Hey, there we go. I just want to thank you, Malini, for doing such a terrific job herding all these cats together with all our different ideas. I know we work together, but it's just really impressed with the quality of work. And David, you're working with someone who's really terrific. So I just want to thank you and thank everybody here, because you guys, we're working hard together, and it's a challenge, but we'll get it done. We'll get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. And also I want to shout out to Renee. She's part of the team as too. And helping to reconcile all of this information. So
Yeah, let me second Richard's comments and thank each of you for your participation. And like Malini said, the comments are always thoughtful, insightful, on point. May have some differences here or there, but Malini does a great job of pulling all that together and really trying to hit the mark that where we can reach a consensus, which is difficult to do. That takes a unique skill set to be able to do that. So definitely appreciate Malini and her efforts for sure.
thank you, and thank you all. There was something, I don't know, Dave. Oh, I did want to let you guys know, and Dave, know more about it, but I do want to let you guys know that your work hasn't gone unnoticed, even for current changes. So, after your first meeting, you guys talked a lot about having the community engaged and identifying revenue sources, about revenue sources in general. So right now, we're not even waiting for the 10-year plan to be adopted. Right now, you'll see in the coming months and here in the next couple of months, there's going to be more engagement to the community about revenue sources, specific revenue sources, especially with parks. I think stormwater, water might be in there too. So
Water is not in there, but
No, sorry. Yeah.
taxes and fees are.
Great, thank you. So your guys' work is already making an impact and your voices. So appreciate all of your time. And with that, hope you all have a good night and thanks for joining us.